and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
Yes, I'm back. It's Ann Northrop.
Nice to see you.
I warned you I was going to try to take more time off this week. Some people asked me if I was sick again. No, I am not sick. He's the one who's sick this week.
Well, I have allergies, but I've taken some medicine, so I hope I don't fall asleep during the show because we have a lot of news. And in the LGBTQ headlines, President Trump's Department of Housing and Urban Development wants to let homeless shelters discriminate against transgender people.
One might almost think they're encouraging them to discriminate, as the Health and Human Services Department is encouraging health providers to discriminate by allowing that to happen in healthcare agencies all over the country.
We're already challenging that in court.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court, however, has rejected a challenge to a Pennsylvania school district's accommodation of trans students.
Shocking. And a Republican county commissioner in Utah has come out at age 40.
We mourn the loss of cabaret singer and gay icon Baby Jane Dexter.
And this one took us by surprise this week. A new discovery found the first documented at this point, gay activist in the United States who started his work in 1906.
Before we were born.
Barely.
The World Health Organization has dropped gender identity disorder from its list of illnesses.
And we had a big court win in Brazil and a huge court defeat in Kenya.
The Lavender Scare about the purging of thousands of LGBT people from government jobs in the 1950s is opening in theaters and is coming to PBS on June 18th. Mark your calendars.
I love this movie. I can't wait to tell you more about it. And The Amazing Race on CBS showed a little clueless homophobia this week. I'll tell you about that.
And I don't think we can start this week without talking what a horrendous week it has been for the Republic. We've just listened to Mueller talk about Trump's potential crimes that Congress should investigate. But even before that, I made a list of the alarming things that have happened in this country. I'm most alarmed about Trump telling the Attorney General to go ahead and investigate his political enemies and, you have free reign on that. And at the CIA and the FBI, and to try them for treason, ramping up of the dismantling of climate science, siding with Kim Jong-un over our allies, bringing charges against Julian Assange that imperil press freedoms, ramping up the war with Iran, plans to pardon U.S. war criminals in the armed services. I mean,
It's true. It's all day, every day.
Right.
It's terrible. And that is why we should not hesitate about impeachment. We cannot afford one extra day of this guy in this administration.
I thought when he got elected it was going to happen right away, like on day 2 of the administration.
Like, surely we cannot live with this mistake the voters have made?
Right.
Yeah, well, that would have been nice. We could have maybe saved some time and some agony. But it just gets worse every day.
Yes, it does.
And it's getting worse specifically for our communities. Where shall we start? With HUD? The Housing and Urban Development Department is promulgating new rules to say homeless shelters can discriminate against anyone they want, basically.
Even though the statistic I read was that transgender people are 2 times more likely to be homeless. I think it's probably a lot more than that.
Yeah.
But this is overturning the equal access rule of 2012, only 2012, that now this will permit discrimination in single-sex or sex-segregated facilities such as bathrooms or sleeping quarters. Where are the transgender people supposed to go?
The street.
Well, and
Honduras.
And then there's the denial of care rule from the Department of Health and Human Services, which basically says if you've got a religious objection to something, and not just LGBT people, but you don't like Jews, for some reason, or Mormons or whatever.
Unmarried mothers, whatever.
You can discriminate.
Well, this again is, canceling non-discrimination rules that were put into effect by the Obama administration and just gratuitously and cruelly taking horrible, taking away these rules. Now, these rules were not hurting anyone,
right?
But this is just the gratuitous cruelty of the Trump administration.
That denial of care rule is being challenged by Lambda, Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, Center for Reproductive Rights, and others. And they're bringing the case in the Northern District of California.
This is all work that our legal organizations should not have to do. This is just extra work piled on by the gratuitous cruelty. I've evidently become fond of that phrase.
Yes.
Piled on by the cruelty of the Trump administration, and it just puts us to work having to defend against these blows, one after another after another.
And Trump ramped up again, making it easier for adoption agencies to discriminate as well. Although we just won a case in New York in federal court where an adoption agency didn't want to comply with New York law that says if you get state money, you can't discriminate when you're doing stuff. So the Alliance Defending Freedom lost that case, are looking at appealing it.
For those wondering why it is that the Alliance Defending Freedom keeps bringing these cases when they lose them all, one after another, the answer is they're good fundraisers for them. As long as they keep going to court to make these claims, people keep donating to them. So it's a full employment program for them. And they just are relentless and shameless, and they think that one of these days they're going to win. It's like the abortion cases.
That's just what I was going to say. As all these Republicans passing all these anti-abortion laws across the country, hoping, whether or not they think they'll succeed at the Supreme Court, and we should talk about the case that the Supreme Court decided this week, or not decided, but...
Well, this is the Indiana case, and they said yes to one thing and no to another, and everybody said, oh, well, this is very moderate of the Supreme Court. But the fact is that what they're doing is waiting until...
Chipping away,
but they're also waiting until after the 2020 election because, as you often say, the Supreme Court is very aware of politics, and they do not want to come down with an anti-abortion ruling before the election because they know that that will get in the way of Trump being reelected. So if they wait until after the 2020 election, then boom, the guillotine falls on women all over the country.
Women are not waiting. They're ramping up, and I'm using that phrase a lot here, what are called anti-networks. Your auntie networks. This is to guide women to abortion across the country when the states, now we're learning that the only abortion clinic in Missouri is closing.
Well, luckily, abortion by chemicals, by pills, is a lot more common than it was in the old days, but it still is not the answer to everything.
And our friend Judge Carlton Reeves, federal judge in Mississippi, an African-American Obama appointee, struck down the heartbeat law there. In 2018, he struck down the 15-week abortion ban, and this one is about 6 weeks, right? And he said, your new law is in open defiance of the court.
Yes, it is, and that is exactly what they have in mind, open defiance, so that they can force this up to the court again, but with a different court than decided Roe v. Wade.
But this Supreme Court, did decline to hear the challenge to the Boyerstown area school district, which had accommodated trans students, and again was challenged by Alliance Defending Freedom. And the court, this was they were appearing on behalf of kids who said, I don't want to be in locker rooms with, someone who was born the other way or whatever. Because the school district made accommodations and said any student who wants privacy can have privacy.
The school was fine with it, and then the right wing came in and challenged it. The parents challenged it, and this was a shocker, actually, that the Supreme Court would refuse to hear that an appeal of that win for us at a lower level.
Thanks to the ACLU, who defended this all the way.
Well, absolutely thanks to the ACLU, but thanks to the whatever justices refused to take the case. That was stunning that they would refuse to take it.
And it was a mixture of judges. It was Republican and Democratic judges.
Yeah.
Not Trump judges, but former...
Do we know? We don't know who on the Supreme Court refused to take the case.
No.
Because they don't announce that.
Right.
But one judge on the Supreme Court did come out with quite a rant this week.
Clarence?
Back to the abortion cases, yes.
Yes.
We skipped past that too fast.
Yes.
In the midst of this Indiana case and deciding some good, some bad, Clarence Thomas gives his own
20-page report.
Yes.
Which nobody joined.
Well, because it was insane. And it was all about how, in addition to abortion, which we have to get rid of, we also have to get rid of contraception. Because contraception is a plot for racial eugenics. It is a plot to destroy the black race, anybody who isn't white. This is anathema to communities of color to have contraception, and instead we should be outlawing it. So what, we can force people to have babies?
I think basically what he's saying is, why can't people just masturbate to pornography like I do?
That was a little too far to go for this.
Well,
I take your point.
Well, I mean, look at his record.
I do look at his record.
It's awful.
It is, it's unbelievable.
He's got a lot of anger.
Meanwhile, of course, the Trump re-election campaign is issuing LGBT for Trump T-shirts.
Up to 3XL.
Just pause a
size.
second to let that sink
That's
in.
insane.
With all this we've just mentioned, which of course is a tiny bit of what he's done to us, LGBT for Trump T-shirts.
But he's not completely politically stupid. He did get elected president, and he is urging Roy Moore not to run for the United States Senate from Alabama.
Well, he urged him not to run for Senate, too, and then changed his mind when he got nominated and went down and campaigned for him.
No, but now he doesn't want him to run in the primary.
I understand, but I'm saying we've been through this dance before.
But he does want the anti-LGBT zealot Ken Cuccinelli as the head of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. He's the former Virginia Attorney General. Even Mitch McConnell hates him and will try to block him.
He's hateful.
Ken signed a letter to get McConnell to step aside 2 years ago.
Well, isn't this is this updated? Is this the second job he's been looked at? Because originally they were going to have the nutcase from Kansas, Chris Kobach, do a big anti-immigrant job, and then he was too horrible for them. So then they brought out Cuccinelli, and then they decided he was so horrible they were going to demote him down to a lower job, which I guess this is.
That's what this is.
Yeah.
All right. What else do I have on the Trump front?
Well, Chelsea Manning is back in prison because they convened a new grand jury. The previous one had expired, so
and that's when your jail term expires, when the grand jury expires.
But then they impanel a new one, and you get sent back to prison when you still won't testify. But now they're really putting the heat on. They're going to fine her $500 a day for not testifying.
After 30 days.
And then it kicks up to $1,000 a day.
After 60 days. It could add up to $500,000 in penalties. These are only usually assessed against corporations, not people.
Yes, and the total indicates the length of the term of the current grand jury, the new one. And, when that runs out, they could put her back in and up the fines even more.
Now, Trump's Federal Aviation Administration, which did not investigate Boeing's MAX 737, which killed hundreds of people, is investigating San Antonio's airport for excluding Chick-fil-A. And I believe that this was, by the way, the only bad bill, that anti-LGBT bill that they passed in Texas was a bill to sort of protect Chick-fil-A at the airport in Texas.
Even saying that is so insane.
Well, that was a great...
We're passing a bill to protect Chick-fil-A at the airport.
Well, really, we expected the worst in Texas, and the House resisted 19 of the 20 bad bills down there.
I think that's great. The fact that they feel a need to protect Chick-fil-A is... I'm tired of hearing the announcers at golf tournaments say, oh, I just have to go get a Chick-fil-A. They're so delicious.
My God. Well, maybe we'll be bailed out by getting rid of the Electoral College. Maine voted to give its electoral votes to the winner of the national popular vote. 15th state to do so. We need 270 votes. We have 189. Nevada would make it 195, and they've already passed it in one of the houses.
We're getting there. We have a ways to go,
And
but
stop
we're
the
closer.
presses. Mississippi has an out gay candidate for the state legislature. Carlton Smith endorsed for the state Senate. He's a Unitarian minister by the Victory Fund. The primary is August 6th, and then he'd have to stand election in November. Be the first out LGBT official in the state. Other states never to have elected an out state legislature. Never. Alaska, Delaware, Louisiana, and Tennessee.
Alaska, Delaware, Louisiana, and Tennessee. I'm surprised Delaware hasn't.
Not yet. And there are some that had them and don't have them now, but that's the list.
But never is that
Right.
list. All right. Well, for possibly a brighter light, keep your eyes on Columbus, Ohio this Saturday. HRC is having its annual dinner there, and Joe Biden, seeing votes staring him in the face in Ohio, is the keynote speaker at the HRC dinner in Columbus.
Right. I guess we should talk about...
Well, speaking of LGBTQ politicians, the New York City Council, with 51 members, 5 of them, I believe, are out LGBTQ, but they are all term limited off the council in a couple of years. So they held an event, a press conference at City Hall to announce a new effort, LGBTQ 2021, to recruit and train new out people to run for the New York City Council. So if you're interested in that, there are people out there who want to help you learn how to run, how to raise money, how to get votes. We could go from 5 to none on the New York City Council
and it's
very
not
quickly.
like we don't have any problems here in New York. The police said that there was a record 83% rise in hate crimes in the first few months of 2019 over the previous year.
Terrible. And in fact, we had a nice big demo this week in New York, a rally called Keep Your Hands Off Our Trans Bodies, acknowledging the recent murders of black trans women specifically, including the famous one in Dallas now that actually got national news coverage. I was shocked by that.
Well, in Dallas, hundreds turned out for the funeral of Mulaysia Booker, 23 years old, the trans woman who was killed, the one who had survived a previous attack in April by a bunch of thugs. This was held in the Cathedral of Hope. And the trans group down there is working with the DA to improve safety and protection.
Well, the rally here drew several hundred people and was very moving. There's Kiara St. James speaking through the bullhorn, and you see a lot of trans flags there. It was quite moving. It was a good-sized rally.
We're under assault in New Jersey. A charter school, a public school, was ordered to cover up a mural of a rainbow heart and then a Keith Haring-like mural that we have a picture of. Because
the students had been assigned to do artwork that copied or mimicked famous artists.
So the building was leased from a Catholic church, and the pastor said that the Keith Haring-style mural was obscene. And he has no idea. He hasn't been to the one at the Gay Community Center in New York. But that's a little out there.
Yes.
But New Jersey schools are required to teach about LGBTQ history. So I don't know how they're handling all that.
Well, they just passed that, so I don't know if it's in effect yet. This Catholic church, which owns the school building, also forced the school psychologist to take down a pro-LGBTQ poster. That Keith Haring-like art was made by a 16-year-old girl who was devastated at what happened. But what's shocking to me is, and we've talked about this years ago, Catholic schools are often sold but with a covenant. And the covenant is that whoever buys that property has to continue to adhere to Catholic doctrine, no matter what they're doing with that property. They've sold the property. It no longer belongs to them, but somehow they are allowed to impose this covenant.
When they turned an Episcopal church in Chelsea into a nightclub, you know, the Limelight. Even Bishop Moore, a closeted gay man who was supportive of gay rights, was so appalled by some of the stuff that was going on there, he came in and desanctified the space.
How'd they feel when they turned it into a mall?
I know. The money changers in the temple.
Well, I, of course, was always amused by the restaurant across the street from our building that had such a terrible reputation. It couldn't do business. Every time they put a new restaurant in there, nobody. And they brought in a priest, a rabbi, and a Buddhist monk to cleanse this space of its bad juju.
There's a burger place on the corner. It seems to be doing okay.
Well, the solution was to put in a reasonably priced, low-scale place.
The only one in our neighborhood.
Wow.
All right. Good news from the International Mr. Leather Contest. For the second time, it has gone to a trans man, Jack Thompson. He is also out about being HIV positive, and he is also biracial, and he got a standing ovation.
Well, in fact, he said, "I'm a proud biracial, openly trans, HIV positive man, and I am enough."
I'm enough.
Yeah, well,
by the way,
good.
The California Assembly passed a bill requiring teachers and school staff to receive training on how to support LGBTQ students.
Well, also in California, and presumably across the nation, Starbucks is celebrating Pride Month with a rainbow-colored cup. But I'm not going to show you that cup because of what is going on with a Starbucks in Fresno. They have an employee who had worked there for 7, 8, 9 years who announced that she was transitioning, male to female, and the Starbucks wouldn't use the correct pronouns and wouldn't let her join the LGBT employee group. And she is suing Starbucks.
What does
for
Howard
this kind
Schultz
of treatment.
have to say? Is he still running?
That's what I'd like to know.
Is he still running?
I don't know. He's still running for president.
By the way, speaking of presidents, there's a new book out that says Harry Reid had to put the screws to Obama in 2011 to get Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal to be a priority.
Yep.
He said that Obama didn't want to do it. And he said, you want your nuclear arms treaty? You got to do this first.
Well, Obama thought it was a loser, and he didn't want to lose his arms treaty. And Harry Reid said, yeah, Don't Ask, Don't Tell is harder. That's why we're going to do it first.
How about that?
And then you'll get your arms treaty, and that worked.
Harry was a Mormon, too.
Well, speaking of Mormon politicians, thank you for that segue. In Utah, Republican County Commissioner
Nathan Ivey
came out at age 40. How could he not have been out? Look at that.
We will include his video announcement in our email. Go to our website, sign up for our emails, and we'll send it to you for the weekly email. But he was a photographer, and he did a gay wedding, and he said, it just kind of struck me. They were unashamed. Now, he is a Mormon, and he said
they were happy.
He said he's had attraction since the age of 9, but felt it was wrong. And
tried to kill himself.
Yes, when he was 22. But he is sticking with his church and his Republican Party.
For the moment.
He did last year take the step when the 4th of July parade in Provo, which is in Utah County, I think. But anyway, he criticized them, and they let the LGBT groups in as a result of his criticism. He's been married to a woman. They're dissolving it. He lives in a small ranching community, still friends with the wife.
And speaking of those marriages, let's go to Alabama, where the legislature is voting to end the requirement for marriage licenses. Now, at first I thought they were just getting rid of all marriage licenses, but I think what they're doing is giving a local option to probate judges which is essentially saying you're allowed to discriminate, but you must sign an affidavit that a couple provides you that you have been married or are together.
It's all about homophobia.
It's all fiction and stupid.
Did we do the fact that the California Senate passed a bill to ensure incarcerated trans people are housed according to gender identity? That passed 29-6.
Very well. Everything in California passes 29-6.
That's because we gerrymandered the other way out there.
Exactly.
Pete Buttigieg, he met his husband Chasten on Hinge. And that seems to be responsible for a 30% increase in profiles on the site in the last 2 months. Pete said it is not a site inundated with hookup culture and sex. These days, apparently more than 60% of same-sex couples meet online. More than 1 million same-sex couples are married in the United States until the Supreme Court says otherwise.
Yeah, a lot of straight couples meet online, too. Well, but if you go online to outhistory.org, you can find the story of the week, which is this discovery by Jonathan Ned Katz, who created outhistory.org, of the earliest known U.S. Gay activist. And it turns out to be Reverend Carl Schlegel.
I've got a picture of him. This is the best picture they could find of him. It's from a newspaper, I think.
Well, this was 1906 when he was speaking up for gay people in New Orleans. He was a German immigrant, and he'd been inspired by the work of Magnus Hirschfeld in Germany and the Scientific Humanitarian Committee. And he didn't get terribly far, I think, here with his work.
They shut him down, but but he was apparently gay himself, and he was sticking up for gay people back then. They voted down there to find him guilty of sin and fired him. And he was also fired from the ministry of a prominent New York church, probably for the same stuff. But he was relentless. Actually, there's a note in the newspaper to those accustomed. It says, Mr. Schlegel was always queer. Wow. This is just amazing stuff. Thank you, Jonathan Ned Katz, for unearthing it.
Outhistory.org. I'm sorry, I forgot to give the control room that Chiron, but outhistory.org is where you can find that and many, many other fascinating stories.
Carl Schlegel. Well, of course, the German movement was in full swing in those days.
It was, but then was shut down by the Nazis.
It was. And they burned their books.
Terrible. All right, international news. In Israel, an Orthodox rabbi has ordained a gay yeshiva student who had been denied ordination by his New York Orthodox yeshiva.
His name is Daniel Atwood. And
the rabbi or the student?
The gay Orthodox rabbi who was ordained.
Yes, the student who was ordained, yeah. And the Orthodox rabbi who ordained him says we need gay rabbis in the Orthodox community, and he's also ordained Orthodox women.
And the Knesset has moved to recognize same-sex partners just of their own members. And give them benefits and things like that.
As opposed to making it a law for the country. Well, speaking of laws for the country and also religion, in Australia, the newly re-elected Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, is prioritizing a religious freedom bill. They have a way with language. Freedom, discrimination, somehow in their eyes, they're the same thing.
We told you about the breakthrough in Taiwan of same-sex marriage. Well, this past Friday, hundreds of same-sex couples married on the first day that was legal. We have pictures of some of them. This is a famous writer, Taiwanese writer named Chen Huxie, married her partner. And then a guy named Shane Lin married his partner. Today, I can openly tell everyone in front of so many people that we are getting married and we are gay. I mean, this is the way people are coming out, embracing their rights.
526 same-sex couples registered to marry on the first day of legal marriage in Taiwan. And meanwhile, in China, in mainland China, or whatever we're calling it these days, Hong Kong activists are demonstrating for marriage. But China, the government is saying Marriage for same-sex couples means marriage would no longer be special.
That's in Hong Kong.
Yes. Now, it turns out, though, that, of course, pre-colonial days, China had a whole history of same-sex relationships being recognized and legal. So a lot of this is about the British colonial era, and now U.S. Imperialistic evangelists who are going around the world to destroy any respect for gay people in countries everywhere.
We overcame it in Taiwan and maybe in Singapore. The grandson of Singapore's founding father, who was Lee Kuan Yew, has married his male partner, but in South Africa, where it's legal.
Because it's not legal in Singapore. More about that later.
And the young man's father, who is the son of the founder, said, "I believe my father would have been thrilled to know about this." And sex between men there is still illegal, though Lee, who was the founder, questioned that in an interview before he died.
Now we're burying the real leads, which are the court cases in Brazil and Kenya.
Yeah.
The good news is from Brazil, where the Supreme Federal Tribunal has outlawed homophobia and transphobia.
It's interesting how they do it. They have 11 justices, 6 have weighed in and said, we're banning it. The other 5 haven't weighed in yet, but they still can. That's how they do decisions there.
Never mind.
Well,
but what they did was they equated it with racism.
Yes.
And now the government has to, or the court has to come up with rules to fold homophobia and transphobia into the rules against racial discrimination.
Well, racism was made a crime in 1989 with up to a 5-year penalty. Now, this is all in the face of Bolsonaro, who is a total anti-gay bigot. Don't know how he's going to respond to all this. Brazil has legalized.
He'll be like Trump. He'll ignore the law.
Well, Brazil legalized same-sex marriage in 2013. It allows gay adoptions and things, so we'll see where all that goes.
Bolsonaro is the stumbling block. Meanwhile, in Kenya, not so good. A 3-judge high court rejected decriminalization of sodomy, same-sex relations.
And they said it's the same for everybody. It doesn't discriminate. What are you talking about? How could they write a 20-page decision and say this?
Well, sodomy laws in the United States, some apply to all people and some apply just to same-sex relationships.
And they're very clear in the decision that marriage is between a man and a woman, and that's part of the reason they did this.
Yes, so same-sex couples or anyone practicing homosexual relations still faces 14 years in jail with this decision. The court said that even though we have a constitution that guarantees equal rights and freedom and all of that, this law criminalizing sodomy is not unconstitutional because it is against traditional moral values to be gay. Activists will go to the Court of Appeal to try to fight this. The UN Human Rights Chief, Michelle Bachelet, the former president of Chile, says it encourages violence against LGBT people.
Did we skip over this?
We did.
We did skip over Honduras, where 350 marched on Idaho-bit, the International Day Against Homophobia and Bisexual, etc., on May 17th.
And transphobia.
Demanding an end to violence, non-discrimination, marriage, and adoption. There are cases there.
Do we have that picture? Did I see
if you can pull that back up from Honduras.
If you
could.
I missed that.
There it is.
It's so incredible to see people marching in places like Honduras
so brave.
Openly and for freedom.
Now, they have cases pending in the Supreme Court there.
Yeah.
They have bills pending in Congress there, and they have cases pending at the Inter-American Court of Human Rights.
So amazing to see that. Meanwhile, in Spain, the right-wing Vox party won 10% of the vote in the recent national elections. That's not good news.
Yeah.
And the European elections were kind of mixed. The right wing didn't do quite as well as people feared, but nonetheless won
They're a force.
A fair amount of...
Back to Latinx America, Argentina, a 19-year-old trans woman sex worker was strangled by a 42-year-old man in broad daylight after a heated argument. We have lost Gala Estefaniana Parilla.
And I'll go back to freedom marches. North Macedonia is going to hold its first Pride Parade on June 29th. They say that it's a form of protest for affirmation, support, and protection of human rights, which is exactly what marches like this should be, and is why we're doing the Queer Liberation March in New York on June 30th.
At 9:30 in the morning at Stonewall Place in the Village, we're marching up 6th Avenue to Central Park.
For a big rally, a big free rally on the Great Lawn from 1 to 4.
And you'll get to move. You won't have to stand on a side street for 4 or 5 hours. You get to move, you get to march, and you get to march for your rights. Come to New York and join us.
And join us anywhere along the way, because unlike the Heritage of Pride Parade, which now excludes individuals stepping off the sidewalk into the parade, everyone can join us, and we hope they do.
We do.
But I'm very moved by these marches in Honduras and North Macedonia. That's where people are really taking a chance and really opening themselves up to some violent
you had a
consequences.
situation in the United Kingdom, in Birmingham, where there were Muslim parents protesting against what they felt was the imposition of LGBT lessons in schools.
Yes.
So there were a lot of big protests, and it's spreading around the country. But in Birmingham, LGBT Muslims, for the first time, led the Pride March in response to all this.
Nice. And the Sultan of Brunei has responded to some of his criticism. He got an honorary degree years ago from Oxford University in Britain, and Oxford grads sign, thousands of signatures on a petition asking for that to be rescinded. But before the university could act, the Sultan of Brunei has returned his honorary degree.
At the School of Oriental and African Studies, there's a big Brunei center there, a museum and everything. I wonder what's going to happen to that.
As you know, there are plenty of war criminals with their names on buildings all over the world. In Chechnya, a gay man who was tortured by the cops is appealing to the European Court of Human Rights, saying that Russia did not adequately investigate his case.
What do you think about this thing that popped up this week about Russia? A new poll shows support for equal rights for gay people at 47%. You have a funny way of showing it over there.
Well,
47%.
I blame the government. I blame the governments
you think
more
the people
than the
are
people.
Fine?
I think the people are mixed, and I think they have been affected by the government, but the government is who you really want to
Like the government of Lebanon, which has blocked
Yes.
Grindr. Oh, well, we skipped over the World Health Organization, didn't we?
I was going to put it in AIDS news next, but that will be a good segue.
I have some other international news.
Well, hurry up.
Disneyland Paris is taking over its own gay pride event. The U.S. doesn't do that.
That's because they want. Oh, they will any minute now.
In Hungary, the office of the mayor of Budapest was fined by the Equal Treatment Authority for blocking LGBT websites. Ireland voted 82% to liberalize divorce, and the Irish Prime Minister is going to meet with Trump, but not at his damn golf course.
Right.
It's going to be at the airport.
Right.
And he's going to bring up our issues.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has canceled its gender identity disorder as a diagnosis. Now, some of this has been controversial because in some places, trans people have wanted that diagnosis because it's the only way they could get insurance reimbursement for surgery or hormones or whatever. But the more enlightened position is not to require such a disordered diagnosis to get that kind of help. Right. So the World Health Organization says you should now be recognizing gender incongruence instead of labeling it a disorder. That is a big deal because the World Health Organization sets the tone for people around the world.
It represents 194 member states. It's a big breakthrough.
Yeah. I also have an answer to a question you asked on the show last week. You and Rob Shooter. Thank you, Rob Shooter. Why has it taken me all this time to thank him? Thank you. You've done 2 weeks in a row. I appreciate it. You asked, why is it that politicians cannot force lower drug prices? Why are they?
Yeah.
Because they get donations from big pharma.
No, but that's not why they can't. That's why they don't.
Yes, well, that was the question. Why don't they?
I'm just tired of hearing them all complain about it and not do anything about it. They're the ones responsible
because
for it.
Because they're getting the money.
Larry Kramer wrote Tony Fauci and said, release Truvada, and he said, get real, I don't have that power. Well, you could be speaking up about it and engineering it, and the public health establishment could declare emergencies and make these things available for the public health.
Follow the money.
But they want to do other fascist things.
Well, speaking of money, GMHC, formerly known as Gay Men's Health Crisis, but now just GMHC, held its annual AIDS Walk, 34th annual AIDS Walk, and raised $4 million. 15,000 people showed up to walk. That is a good thing.
And I'm glad that the New York Times finally did a big article on the front page of the Science Times about the way research on HIV has overlooked women forever. But they do raise...
That's about 30 years out of date.
Yes, but...
And they didn't mention ACT UP and the Women's Caucus.
But they are finally highlighting it, but obviously few medications are tested on women, even though women are more than half. But the barriers include restrictions on giving drugs to women of reproductive age is one of the issues.
Please, this is such an old story.
Well, all right.
Anyway.
Pakistan, by the way, had a big outbreak of HIV in a town called Larkaha. 494 kids, 113 adults. It's some quack doctor who's been using dirty needles on them. He's in prison.
The story never changes. Nonetheless, we sit here bringing it to you. Mm-hmm. All right. Entertainment news.
Sure.
Well, I want to bring you the Amazing Race update. So they travel around the world. They have these couples who are all racing against each other. And one is two gay men who are a couple who are racing. And they win this leg of the race in Uganda. Now, first of all, the fact that they're going to Uganda, at the beginning of the show, they say, we have to go to Uganda? Really? Are we going to be safe there? This is terrible. We don't want to go to Uganda. But they say, all right. We'll buck up. We will do it. We'll go to Uganda. And they have the competition there, and they win that leg of the race.
But they're in prison.
They're going to be. They win the leg of the race. They've survived Uganda. They get on the mat. They're saying, you are you team number one. And for being team number one, you win an all-expense-paid trip to Singapore.
Oh, my God. Out of the frying pan into the fire.
Oh, my God. Where homosexuality, illegal.
Well, it was illegal here in 13 states until 2003.
Well, the Amazing Race is going to Uganda and then sending people to Singapore. Thank you very much.
Let's talk about the thing we're most enthusiastic here about, Lavender Scare.
Love it.
This is a movie by Josh Howard, and we're going to show you him.
Former 60 Minutes producer.
Right. And, it's about the enormous purge of gay people, in the 50s, starting with Eisenhower in government, but spreading throughout the land where everybody started turning each other in. So we're going to show you the trailer for The Lavender Scare, which is coming to theaters right now.
The Lavender Scare.
We have your friend in the next room. She's already told us that you're gay. You give us the names of others and we'll go easier on you.
Committee will please come to order.
Homosexuals must not be handling top secret material. The pervert is easy prey to the blackmailer.
It started this Lavender Scare. It started this systematic campaign to identify and remove all suspected gay men and lesbians from the Federal Civil Service.
I was called to the FBI office.
They wouldn't allow legal representation.
I was a scared kid.
They wouldn't reveal the evidence.
They said, we have information, you are homosexual. Do you have any comment?
And they would threaten exposure.
I submitted my resignation.
I lost my job at the patent office.
That was the end of it. I was out. I was the first person to fight back out of all of those huge number of people that were fired in the 50s.
And in 1965, he led a protest outside the White House, which was both an act of conscience, but also an act of extraordinary courage. We are proud of you, Frank, and we are grateful to you for your leadership.
it's a heartache that you have the rest of your days.
All of this needs to be said. People need to know.
So for those of you listening on the podcast, this purge continued from the early 50s through 1995 before they officially ended that policy, and affected 10,000 men and women who were forced out of government.
Yes, and Frank Kameny is one of the central characters in this, because he fought it right up to the Supreme Court and was before a congressional committee. I had the honor of having him as a speaker at the University of Virginia when I was a kid, and got to march with him in my first Pride March in 1974. Frank Kameny. I also knew his mother, who was in Parents of Gays, but Frank's long dead. I mean, he was a great guy.
Yeah, he was a great guy. I was thrilled to know him a little.
And Barbara Giddings.
And yes, all of them. They were so brave. And this is all pre-Stonewall that they were doing this work.
Yes.
Which is why we object to designating Stonewall as the beginning of the movement.
It's a heartbreaking story. It really is heartbreaking. I cried watching it.
Yeah.
But it also, we need to acknowledge this is still going on right now against transgender people.
Absolutely.
And
against all of us all over the world. So we're going to show you in a second the interview with the director, Josh Howard, but this movie, The Lavender Scare, is going to play in New York and LA starting June 7th.
At Cinema Village in New York for a week, just for a week, and then June 18th nationwide on PBS TV.
Yes. If you don't get, and it's great to see it in the theater because then you see it on the big screen, but if you don't catch it there, June 18th on PBS, you must see The Lavender Scare. It is stunning.
This is our history.
And this is a little interview that Josh Howard, the director, did talking about making this story.
I came across the book, The Lavender Scare, completely by accident, and I was stunned as I was reading it. I thought I had a pretty good understanding of America in the 1950s, the Cold War, the McCarthy era, the Red Scare, as it was known. But what was remarkable to me was reading the story of the Lavender Scare and finding out there was a whole aspect of this time period that I knew nothing about.
I, Dwight D. Eisenhower, do solemnly swear.
One of the first things President Eisenhower did when he took office in 1953 was sign an executive order officially prohibiting gays and lesbians from working for the federal government. The rationale was, you're in the closet, you're leading a hidden life, you're susceptible to blackmail. This began an effort by the federal government to try to identify and then fire any employee it believed was gay.
I don't care what they have to say. I don't care how much they scream and squeal. If anyone wants to come in and remove them in some dainty fashion, they're welcome to it. But in the absence of that, if lumberjack tactics are the only kind of tactics that crowd understands, and take my word for it, those are the kind of tactics we're going to use on them, as long as there is one there endangering the lives of 150 million Americans.
More than 10,000 federal employees lost their jobs. It questioned the most widespread and longest-lasting witch hunt in American history. And it was just amazing to me that such a important part of our history had been completely overlooked. This story is a classic tale of both tragedy and triumph. Tragedy because thousands of lives were ruined during the 1950s and 60s by this policy of the U.S. government. But there was triumph, too, because that heartache ignited a sense of outrage in the gay community that really helped spark the early days of the gay rights movement. And I really think that's an important reason to make this film, to understand the struggles and sacrifices of prior generations, and to also see how commitment and activism can make a real difference.
This was front page news across the country. It was on the front pages. The New York Times regularly referred to us as perverts. Perverts. The word was the word. They didn't put it in quotes.
Well,
we were just referred to as perverts. And people were turning in their neighbors.
Yes.
because I think he's one, and I think you should get rid of him because they were getting the message that we are this danger. I mean, Eisenhower, when he was a general, conducted a purge in the military until his aide, who was a lesbian, said, I'll get you the list, but you're gonna have to start with me. But then as president, he went on and did this. And they had Joe McCarthy up there, a closet case.
And talking about
working with Roy Cohn, another closet case, who went on to be the lawyer for Donald Trump.
And talking about squealing and dainty, all these words meant to...
He was the Donald Trump of his day, Joe McCarthy, for sure. Theatrical. Ugh.
Terrible.
So very painful, very, very painful. And it's, as you say, it goes on around the world still.
It does. And I just can't say enough about how much I love this movie and how powerful it is and how I think it really gives Frank Kameny his due in a deep and multi-layered way. I really appreciated that.
Yes.
So thank you, Josh, and I hope all of you watch the movie.
If you want more history, I mean, every museum around the country seems to be having an exhibit, and the New York Historical Society opened up their Stonewall 50. I'm wearing a Stonewall 50 button from that exhibit at the New York Historical Society, and it's terrific. It's on the second floor. It's got a whole timeline right there on the wall. Was a picture in the middle there of Andy Velez, who we just lost when he was a younger activist. He died at the age of 80 just a couple of weeks ago. And then we have a picture of Roll Arena in front of the Roll Arena exhibit. That's her in the flesh. Roll Arena, who was still around and was doing. And then the Revolting Lesbians gathering around the Revolting Lesbians poster that's on the wall. Ann McGuire and others you will recognize. So it was just delightful. There it is, Stonewall 50.
Tell them where the New York Historical Society is.
Central Park West and 77th Street.
Yes.
You can take the C train or the B train up there during the week. New York Historical Society, and they have a side room about New York nightlife, but it's for adults only. It's not very racy. It's not very racy.
Are we back to the Mapplethorpe days?
No.
Oh, come on.
No, actually, that night I asked the guy if that was true. When I went back to see it, there wasn't any guard there, and there was no notice. There was an advisory of some kind, but it wasn't. As somebody said to me, it really doesn't deal with sex. It deals with the movement, but in a very good way.
Well, I'm fine dealing with the movement, but putting warning labels on stuff is really annoying.
Yeah.
Well, do we need a warning label on Frankie and Johnny and the Claire de Lune?
Yes, there is nudity right from the start. That's the big feature of that Terrence McNally play. It's being revised from 1987. This is Michael Shannon and Audra McDonald. I think they were a little miscast in this, and it's a little dated, but it kind of grew on me in Act 2. It's about two down and out people who were in their about 40 who were, had given up on love and are trying to find it. And well,
speaking of nudity,
I'm still looking forward to the Terrence McNally American Masters.
Okay. Vida is back on the Starz Network. This is the show that started last year. Just 6 episodes last year, 10 this year. 2 sisters go back to their home in East Los Angeles into a basically barrio neighborhood, and their mother has died, leaving, much to their surprise, a wife. And they're taking over the bar, which is barely surviving, and it's all about relationships in that neighborhood. And the first year was fantastic. So it came back, and now they've got all 10 episodes on demand available for viewing. I watched the whole thing in about 2 days. There are half-hour episodes, so you can breeze right through it. And there is a lot of sex and nudity in this one. One of the sisters is a lesbian, mostly. And it's terrific. Vida, V-I-D-A, on the Starz Network.
How do you have time to breeze through anything when you're mounting the Queer Liberation March on June 30th, on Sunday,
Good question,
June 30th.
Andy. Sunday, June 30th. 9:30 a.m. Sheridan Square. We step off. We go up 7th Avenue a block, turn right on 10th Street over to 6th, and then all the way up 6th Avenue. We're telling people, if you don't want to get up that early, go to Bryant Park at 11, and we'll pick you up along the way. There'll be fun there. and protest. This is a political march. It will be a little bit of everything, but it will be people in the streets. We've lost that in this city.
I'm looking forward to it, and I haven't looked forward to Pride in a long time.
Sunday, June 30th.
I'm also looking forward...
Reclaim Pride. NYC.org. You see that on the screen there. ReclaimPrideNYC.org.
I'm looking forward on HBO to the last 2 episodes of the lesbian drama Gentleman Jack. Now, if you think LGBT life is tough now, try 1832 in West Yorkshire, I think it is.
Yeah.
Yes, and this is a fantastic drama. Very jazzily. It's so touching and interesting, and I can't wait to find out what happens. And now I see it's going to have a second season on HBO.
And Killing Eve wound up its second season, but there'll be more of that. But that's all available on demand if you want to see it. If you missed that.
Right. So we're.
Baby Jane Dexter.
Yeah, Baby Jane. We all knew her. She was a gay icon, a cabaret singer with a booming contralto. She was very close to Vito Russo, and she was on the Emerald City, the gay cable show, in 1977. She wrote a song about being raped back in 1978 as well, so she dealt with controversial things. But she was a mainstay of AIDS benefits before anybody in show business was doing this kind of stuff, before it became fashionable. And she was just one of our greatest supporters, and very sorry to lose her at the age of 72.
Yes, much too young. And so we're going to go out today with some video of Baby Jane Dexter performing at the 2015 MAC Awards. The MAC Cosmetics Foundation was a huge, it's dissolving, I think, a huge AIDS charity. And she appeared to help the fundraising for the foundation. So goodbye till next week, and here's Baby Jane Dexter with one of her signature performances.
May God bless and keep you always. May your wishes all come true. May you always do for us and let others do for you. May you build a ladder to the stars and climb on every rung. May you stay forever young. May you grow up to be righteous. May you grow up to be true. May you always know the truth and see the light surrounding you. May you always be courageous, stand upright and be strong. May you stay forever young. Forever young. Forever young. May you stay forever young. May your hands always be busy. May your feet always be swaying. May you have a strong foundation when the winds of change is shaking. May your heart always be joyful. May your song always be sung. May you stay